Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. If you've never been here before, this is where we play solo tabletop RPGs and basically have a ride-along. If you're here live, you join in the ride-along if you want in the live chat, which is just at the side of the screen. And if you're not watching live and you just kind of want to know what the game is like or what we come up with in this stream, down in the description below, there will be timestamps. But basically, it's a stream about writing together just because it's fun. And we use sort of games, what are called solo tabletop RPGs or journaling games, as a matter of, as a means to sort of inspire ideas and see what we come up with. And tonight, we're kicking off. It was meant to kick off on Tuesday, but unfortunately, on Tuesday, my power went out. For those who watch the community tab of this channel would know that. And the consequence, of course, of my power going out was I could not stream. So we're about 1 day behind. And you might say, it's September, it's not October. Why are we doing spooky season already? And there's a simple answer to that. Spooky season starts when I feel that I have enough content to get me to Halloween. And that's more than normal this year. So I won't babble much more, but just to repeat, it's a ride along. We're going to create some sort of story, in this case about chasing our little sister into a forest that she should not be going into. And if you are here live, feel free to join in the live chat like GS and Genera have. GS says, good evening, my favorite organ music. Yes, that intro music that I use for Halloween for the Varietal Show is extremely popular. And Genera says, spooky season all year. Okay, good. We've got the right crowd for this. Okay. I'm going to put on my regular music, though. I wanted to keep the mood going a little bit longer, but I do find that it's hard to write to this more dreary stuff. So, let's go with you. There we go. And let's talk about what the game tonight is going to be about. Which means I have to find this. There it is. So tonight we're playing what's called a lit game. Lit game is the main part of the show. Lit game stands for literature game, but really there's like 10,000 different names for them. They're sort of usually found on places like itch.io. Solo tabletop RPGs, journaling games, lyric games, expressive games. There's 27,000 other names for them. Because if there's one thing that we millennials love to do, it's to give things lots of names that have existed for a long time, and then usually pretend we invented them. It's not a wallet, it's a coin preservation area. But the lit game tonight is a pretty interesting one. It's very rules light, so if you're a person who hates the rules explanation, don't worry, it won't take very long. It has this very metal title page that says Unhallowed, which of course is the name of the game. If you can discern that, it's very sort of stretched out in that classic death metal way. But I'm going to read you the little flavor text that intros this, because I think it tells you most of what you need to know about this game. I'm also going to extend it down a touch. There we go. It says, you live on the edge of a forest. You grew up here. You've never lived anywhere else. One day you glance out the window and you see your younger sister walking away from you, headed into the trees. The forest is a dangerous place, and your sister should know, she does know, that she is not allowed to go there by herself. You run out the door, calling her name, but by the time... I lost my place. But by the time you reach the edge of the forest, she's out of sight. All you see are her light footprints on the soft earth of the forest floor. Without hesitation, you follow. So it is meant to be sort of a spooky horror game. And most spooky horror games don't generally have happy endings, FYI. I don't know if we'll actually get to the end, but according to this, you can play a game in an hour. The only thing you actually really need for this is like a pen and paper, some way to journal, and a D6, which again is just what normal people call a dice, but when you're a nerd like me and you have 50 different dice types, we call them D6s. And the basic idea here is you're going to take stress. You start with a certain amount of stress. And when you roll your D6, it's going to give you prompts that we're going to write about. GS says, I remember when the term cosplay came into play, and I wondered what magical new activity this was, and then I found it was just dressing up in a costume. Yeah, classic millennials. We are notorious for this. Anyways, you roll the dice and you add your stress. And your stress can only increase as the game goes on, and the sort of end game stuff occurs at the higher level of the rolling chart. And so by design, as you go through this game, you will start getting... You're less likely to get repeated prompts. It does give some advice on what to do with repeated prompts, I believe. I don't know, I read like 10 games today trying to pick one. But if it doesn't, we'll just deal with it when we're there. So for example, if we rolled, you start for the game that we're going to play, where you start with 4 stress, and we roll a dice, and I rolled a 6. That means I have a 10, and I would go to the prompt 10, which is there is no grass in this clearing, only packed earth, and it goes on. I'm not going to read it all now because I think part of it is to leave a little bit of mystery. And then based on that prompt, we write a little bit of our thoughts as we're trying to find her sister. And by design, and we'll see how well I can stick to this, because I'm a writer through and through and I like to describe lots of things and whatever else. This game is supposed to be short entries because you are in a rush, you are running the whole time. So, we should be able to get through a whole game if Rory can restrain himself. And that's it. You track your stress. There are a few ways that you get stress. Sorry, there's one way that you get stress. I'm thinking of another game. Which is you roll the d6, you add your stress, you get your prompt. You write out your prompt. Your prompt's going to have some sort of challenge or potential for danger in it. You then roll your d6 again, and if the result is less than or equal to whatever your current stress score is, you increase your stress by 1. Which means starting at 4, by the time you get to 6 stress, it seems like you will just get 1 stress every time, which is sort of the design of the game. The game, like most horror games, seems to be more about falling apart. Okay, and it says if you've not used the final prompt, which is 20 plus yet, start a new round. Okay. And I think, yeah, okay, I think the modification table, it's coming back to me now. I think the modification table is there. If you happen to roll the same prompt twice, I think you roll the d6 again, you take something off the modification table and reconsider it. So, Cole's notes. Roll a d6. Add stress. That number will associate to a prompt. We read the prompt. We write a few sentences about our breathless chasing through this creepy forest. We roll the d6 again. If it's equal to or if the result is less than or equal to your current stress, you increase it by 1. Oh, okay, so it's less than. That increases your stress by 1, which means eventually everything is stressful. If we get the same prompt twice, we roll on the d6 again on this modification table, and we just sort of reinterpret the same prompt. If none of that makes any sense to you, it's okay. Most of this stuff makes the most sense as you play it. Okay. So with this game, you start with a d4. you start with 4 stress. For the type that we're playing, there's different sort of modes to start with. I'm not going to go into. We are, I don't know, what's the name? I'm kind of going for like a, at the latest, like 1850 kind of vibe. I'm not going to be like talking old English or anything here, but I'm undefined time, but I do feel like it's better if it's sort of a no cell phones situation. Genera says, sounds like an adulthood simulator, increasing stress until heart attack. I don't know if anyone's ever played the game, what's it called? Overcooked. It's a video game where you're cooking stuff and delivering in a sort of kitchen setting. Like a business kitchen setting. And I used to work in kitchens, and my partner loves the game, and I just simply cannot play it with them because it is too successful at the stress of the experience of being in a kitchen. Okay. What about Lawrence? Hello, wake up. There we go. Lawrence, Strathorn. A boy of 16 years who is looking forward to leaving home and beginning a blacksmith apprenticeship. Anyone else wants to add anything for this character, they are welcome to. But I don't want to waste too much time here. Let's roll our dice. Okay, so it's a 4, and we start with 4 stress. So that is an 8. As you enter this clearing, you see a group of deer dash away into the forest ahead of you. You follow your sister's trail across the clearing, and you see the buck looking back at you from deep within the trees, staring. You blink, and he's gone. Is anything else watching you? Okay. There is this sort of built-in premise. I didn't read most of the prompts, as I generally don't want to, because, you know, that's the fun of the game. But I will say it seems like the underlying premise is that there is a monster in the woods that of an undefined nature that is drawing your sister on and is hunting you. So, I cannot believe she would dash off like this. Scarlet was a good girl. She practiced her letters and the good manners. Mum could teach her. But what is this rebellion? Why would she dash into the what's a imposing name for woods? Shadow pines, the the furious firs. That just sounds like a really bad high school like basketball team. GS says 16, he's old. I suppose so. I was on the fence. I don't know. Once you go 14, it feels different to write. Good name for some creepy woods. How about the the crying... no, the Screaming Woods? The Screaming... Into the Screaming Valley. How about that? She knows how... the winds whip through there and carry the worst burdens of a storm. I look to the sky through the canopy the howling forest. That's good. I like that. It's the wrong there. Carry the worst burdens of a storm. I look to the sky through the canopy of fire. Falls. Autumn's fiery. The canopy of autumn's fiery leaves and see the swirling gray and black of an encroaching storm. In the distance, a crack of lightning that startles something in the clearing ahead. I sprint through the brittle and dead thorns, tearing at my best woolen pants, and break out of the undergrowth just in time to see deer slipping away into the forest. What are some traits we should have about this monster that we can like build in as we go along? I call for Scarlet. Ooh, snapping and cracking with each lunging footstep. I like that. There is a chorus of trampling hooves, cracking, snapping and cracking. All around. The deer have startled off. I cry out for Scarlet. Ask if she can hear me. And then I see one of the deer waits. and watches. And the shadows of the tree line. I can only see its wide and uncanny eyes. Just Fleece It Out says, lol, GS. Hello, Just Fleece It Out. Haven't heard from you for a bit. It's good to have you here. I wonder... Oh yeah, good point. What odor does the entity leave behind? What's a plant like known to be poisonous? Like nightshades? No, that's a family of plants. I think it should smell like a poisonous plant. Somewhat sweet, but perhaps too much so. Oh, I have a descriptive word that can buy us some time anyways. The winds shift down from the high valley crest as the black clouds thicken overhead, and I catch a sick I think sickeningly sweet probably counts as a cliche at this point, but I'm okay with that. I catch a sickeningly sweet scent of rotting apples left too long in the rain. Yeah, Gennaro, that was sort of what I was thinking. Like something that isn't immediately obviously unpleasant, but also kind of has bad associations. Like I think honey is good as well. I think I can work that in. I think it should make it a little bit like hard to define because it should be sort of otherworldly. So I think I can work honey in a minute. Cloying odor, that's a good way. The cloying odor was almost a touch warm, like fresh honey. Yet something sat. Something wove into it that curled my nose. The deer, dark in its coat, turned and walked onward into the thickest of the woods. I was not a superstitious man, but I felt compelled to follow. Okay. Time to roll the dice and see if that gives us more stress. So we're at 4. And I rolled a 6, which I think means I get 1 stress. The result is less than or equal to the current stress. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna Knock this up to a 5 stress. Chat, you're gonna have to keep me honest on this. I'm gonna start forgetting. Which means time to roll again and add a 5. It is a 1. That's not the same prompt, right? No, it's not. Okay, so that's a 6. Because 1 plus 5 are stress. As you cross this clearing, you hear... Oh, good, it's a clearing, because we are crossing a clearing. You hear rapid, stumbling footsteps behind you. You spin around, but the sound is gone. A moment later, a crash of breaking sticks erupts ahead of you, as if someone were rushing through the underbrush out of the clearing. Can you bring yourself to keep moving in the same direction as those sounds were headed? It's a good description there, GS. GS says, and it's like an animal that's been sprayed by a skunk. Even once the source is gone, the traces remain on anything that has recently encountered it. I think that's a cool idea. Okay, we hear something behind us and in front of us. I sprinted across the clearing and tore on into the darkening game path. Trail. Left by the grim, by the strange deer. I pushed up, clambering over mossy rocks and sliding sliding's the wrong word, and slipping on a carpet of dead leaves. Genera says skunky rotten apple honey. I love it. The scent mingle. The scent clung to me as the spray of a skunk. It mingled with the damp, with the musty. Musty is good. Musty is... You don't have an old-timey horde story if you don't have musty. It mingled with the musty odor of the torn up. Musty odor of the mud streaked on my elbows and knees, but never lessened. I must have climbed and ran for 20 minutes or more before I startled at a crack of lightning. Breathless and shooken and shook? Breathless and shaken. What am I talking about? Shooken. Like, I blame the fact that I'm on a stream. I do know how to spell, I promise you. Despite all outward appearances of how I write on these streams. Breathless and shaken. I leaned on my knees and wheezed against my dry, rasping voice. think that actually makes sense, but I'm going to move on. I leaned on my knees and wheezed against my rasping. The crack came again behind me and louder. I realized it was not lightning. But the sound of something, of a log falling and shattering. I could not imagine what could have destroyed. Man, whatever. I stepped carefully back towards where I heard it and whispered between my gasps, "Scarlet? Is that you? Come on, baby girl. Let's go home." But I was... GS says, "Yikes, not lightning. My stress level went up a point." But I was interrupted by... what was it? How did they describe it? Can you bring yourself to keep moving? Whatever, yeah. As if someone was rushing through the underbrush. Okay, yeah. But I was interrupted by something rushing past. They always say yards in old-timey stories, as much as it pains me. So yards it is. Something rushing past, not 10 yards up the embankment. The leaves stirred up like skin with a needle. Running under it. It was fast. And when it reached the peak of the cliff edge, just out of sight, it screamed a scream that decayed into a rattle, into a death rattle. Why not? Whoops. Decayed into a death rattle. The birds and rodents fled all at once. Until the forest was silent in a way I have never heard. Okay, let's see how much let's see if our stress goes up. I think it probably will. It's a 1, so yes. So we're up to 6, which means I think pretty much everything makes our stress go up at this point. Okay. So we're up to 6, right? Just did it, and I already forgot. Yes. Okay, let's roll our d6 and see what our next prompt is. So 1, so that's a 7. That's more clearings. You find a clearing where dozens of trees have fallen over. A strong wind buffets you, whipping your hair and clothes around you. You lean into it, forcing your way forward. Do you hear the screams barely masked by the howling gusts? Well, this fits with how we named it. This forest, the Howling Forest. Do you hear your sister's screams amongst them? Okay, so a chorus of screams in a clear-cut place with a strong wind. And I realize I'm having a hard time identifying prompts and whatever else, but if you're in the chat and you feel so compelled, you're like, this would be a cool idea, or a word you even want me to use, or trait of the creature, you let me know in the chat, and I will work it in. Okay. So, Dispatch Force was suddenly silent in a way I have never heard. I considered it. Turning back. I thought perhaps the wisest move is to call into town and return with a well-armed party. Yet, it wasn't wisdom that would have driven that. It would have been cowardice. An abdication of my duties as a brother. Still, I found myself paralyzed with indecision and fear. My foot fell in the wrong direction. Just one step. But I was righted, and I heard the long wailing cry of a child up the embankment. Where the cackling creature had slid. A sweeping blast of chilled air carried down again, and on it I smelled that sickly honey scent. I had to pursue. I had to keep going. It was little less than a cliff, draped with slime and moss. But I was able to surmount it. Atop the cliff's edge, I climbed into a clearing so recently made. This is getting more Victorian in my prose, but I find that happens with horror. I don't know, it just works better. It was an unnatural scene of destruction. Something akin to a war zone. The trees, some thick and older than the country in which they grew, were torn down to splinters. That stood as tall and bright my favorite word, spires. Tall and bright spires. Whatever had cleaved these trees. Whatever had cleaved these trees. Had done so recently. Anch Sharma, let me know if I'm saying that wrong, has come into the chat. Hello, Anch. Thank you very much for joining the chat today. And thoroughly. Spread out before me was a clearing made by recent violence of something large. The icy wind blasted against me here, with a ferocity I could not explain. By the incoming storm alone. It roared in my ears, pulled my jacket tight to my ribs and cut easily through the thick wool I wore. Is there anything else I'm missing on this prompt? You find a clearing where dozens of trees have fallen over, a strong wind buffets you, whipping your hair and clothes around. You lean into it, forcing your way forward. Oh, the screams, that's right. And cut easily through the thick wool I wore. I was as bare as a child. As bare as a babe left in the woods for the wolves. The wind in its roar muffled a chorus of cries and screams that emanated from the shadowy trees. I could hear Scarlet's voice amongst them. I was sure. No sooner had I picked out the voice did I catch another whiff of the sweet, rotting fruit that had carried me up here. I pressed my shoulder into the Arctic wind and pushed on towards the cries. Okay, rolling the dice again. Adding our, it's gonna add more stress. We know that, so our stress will now be 7. I think this might be our last roll, because I think we might be running out of time. So hopefully we get something good. Whoops. Rolling the dice now for the prompt. Plus 7. It's 5 plus 7. 5 plus 7 is 12. It's another clearing. As you enter this clearing, you notice 2 deer lying off to one side. One lifts its head and stares at you into your eyes, into your soul, glancing over your shoulder as you exit the clearing. The deer continues to stare. What did that gaze feel like? Only because we're running out of time. I'm gonna re-roll because I don't feel like I can get much out of that. Oh. 7 plus 4 is 11. The trail passes over a rocky outcropping. On the other side, a second set of footprints has joined the first. Oh, perfect. These are larger, and you think that they were the hoof prints of a deer, but there are only 2. Deer definitely do not walk on 2 legs. Thank you for clarifying, game. You were sure of it. What happened here? Okay. If anyone has ideas about how we could make an ending out of this, I'm open to that, but it doesn't need to have an ending, frankly. It's just about playing the game. Also, horror can just end by, being vague. From here, the embankments of the forest valley turned steep to rocky outcroppings and strung together by goat trails. Gia says, "Oh, it's an upright creature." I feel like the game is hinting towards like a Wendigo kind of thing. 2 rocky outcroppings strung together by groped trails. The dark and heavy clouds began their deluge. Gennaro says, "I keep imagining a wolf-moose combo. Like a wolf's head, because by far, everything about a moose is intimidating but the face. Their big, goofy clown face, and then they're just so much bigger than anyone thinks they are. They're huge and terrifying, and their rack is huge. The dark and heavy clouds began their deluge. Rivers wove around abutment's a word, right? I don't know why I'm doubting this. I'm having one of those moments where just nothing looks right. Yeah. Stone abutments that they're like structural leaning things that held back the loose shale and gravel of the scramble towards the valley's highest ridge. Were it not for these outcroppings directing the rainfall, I may not have seen the faint impressions of a child's foot on the path ahead. It wound up like a jagged stitch against let's just keep it simple there. Against the cliff. There's only so many words I have for rocks here. It wound up like a jagged stitch against the cliff. Far up. Where the rain far enough that the rain drew a gray curtain between me and it. I saw a small shadow stumbling on. I called, but the lightning was shouting. Is that a thing? Oh, you guys are coming up with ways to get rid of the monster. Oh, that's interesting. I had never planned for him to be successful, but let me think about that. There's some theories here. Dracula and garlic. The kind of theories, sunlight. Or it's a werewolf. Okay. But the lightning was bellowing. It's frightening growls. And my voice was little more than a gnat. In an orchestra. This is not the greatest analogy I've ever done. I pushed beyond reason and my limits, up and up the slick river that unsettled the shale. Every step along this trail oh, I see. Okay, I misread that. Okay, I won't say that yet in case some people aren't looking at the chat and want the surprise. I think I could make that work. If I'd thought of that sooner, I probably would have built some of that in earlier. Oh well, that's how first drafts go. Every step along this trail took me higher. And made every slip turn my heart quicker. Quicken my heart. Whoops. More. Gia says, well, excuse us. No, I'm not complaining. I just realized that I could have done more with the concept. It's a strong concept. Could have made reference to them being like having a single parent or something. Every step along this trail took me higher and made every slip quicken my heart more. I was deep into a mist of rain and fog. The path was marked with feet dissolving. Footprints, Rory. Footprints. Use the right words. Footprints rapidly dissolving in the waterfall. A storm was creating. Yeah, good point, GS. Hello, Joanna. Joanna Baxter says, hi, Rory. Was just watching some horrible video about terrors at sea, as I do, and then you appeared. Well, it's good to see you. We're playing a tabletop RPG, a solo one, that uses prompts to get you to write a journal from the perspective of a character. And we are basically doing horror. Joanna says, I feel like the story's going up and up and up. Maybe time to fall somewhere and get swept downwards. Absolutely. That will definitely happen. The path was marked with footprints rapidly dissolving in the waterfall the storm was creating. I was above the tree line. In the tree line? In the thick mist. The high ridge. When I saw her red cape. Her red coat. I cried her name, but she wasn't looking at me. A lightning flash cut through the fog. Cloak, thank you. A lightning flash cut through the fog and revealed a silhouette of a tall and terrible thing. It wore a crown of thorns. No, that's very Jesus. A crown of... and wore a rack. Wore a deer's rack as a crown. No crown. Crown is stupid. Wore a deer's rack, but stood upright. And it seemed to have enchanted or terrified my little sister. Joanna says, where was the coat? On the ground, in the distance, downwards in the thick of the forest. Right now, it's on her. Joanna says, we love Crown of Thorns. We used to smoke doobies with Bible paper. I think you told me that once. And it seemed to have enchanted or terrified my little sister. I forgot all my reason and leapt forward, scrambling like a hound after the hare up the slick, broken rocks of this high cliff. I jumped on her cloak. I jumped on her to grasp her away from the monster. But the cloak fell flat, and I slid. Joanna says, got to go. You're doing fun stuff. What a rando situation and pleasure. Good to see you, Joanna. And I slid down the shale. The cloak fell flat, and I slid down the shale. Grasping her empty jacket. tumbling with terrible cracks and blinding strikes to my head until I tumbled out. Broken and limp back at the tree line. There, in the muck and under a falling stream of hard rain, I saw the creature for what it was. It held Scarlet's hand and sneered at me with the unmistakable face of my father. Gone he had been for years, mostly known through tales from my mother of his terror. He watched me for a moment, then walked on in this terrifying hybrid, animalistic form. And walked on in this dark. With Scarlet at his side. There we go. I went with the bleak ending anyways. Joanna says, no, it was you. I missed that one. No? Maybe I made a joke about it once, but no. Lawrence Strathorn. Okay. Well, let's read back what we created. I did consider having like a fight or whatever because you guys had some cool ideas on how to do it. Problem is, I think that would have taken 20 more minutes. So, let's see what we got here. If you're coming to this part of the show, it's because you just want to know what the results are. And so, we played today a game called Unhallowed. And the way Unhallowed works is you roll a d6 and you get these prompts, and as you go along, you build more and more stress, which has added to the d6, and you get higher and higher up the 20 prompts list until you start getting more and more uncanny and dangerous things. But the basic principle of it is that our sister wandered into a dangerous forest when she wasn't supposed to, and so we're running after her trying to find her. And this is obviously the wrong music, so let's do... I cannot believe she would dash off like this. Scarlet was a good girl. She practiced her letters and the good manners Mum could teach her. But what is this rebellion? Why would she dash into the howling forest? She knows how the winds whip through there and carry the worst burdens of a storm. I look to the sky through the canopy of autumn's fiery leaves and see the swirling gray and black of an encroaching storm. In the distance, a crack of lightning that startles something in the clearing ahead. Maybe Scarlet. So I sprint through the brittle and dead thorns between us, tearing at my best woolen pants, and break out of the undergrowth just in time to see deer slipping off away into the forest. There is a chorus of trampling hooves, snapping and cracking all around. The deer have startled off. I cry out for Scarlet, ask if she can hear me. There is no response, but then I see one of the deer has stopped. It waits. It watches. In the shadows of the tree lines, I can only really see its wide and uncanny eyes that follow me as I march around the clearing crying for Scarlet. The winds shift down from the high valley crest as the black clouds thicken overhead, and I catch a sickeningly sweet scent of rotting apples left too long in the rain. The cloying odor was almost a touch warm, like fresh honey, yet something wove into it that curled my nose. The deer, dark in its coat, turned and walked onward into the thickest of the woods. I was not a superstitious fellow, but I felt compelled to follow. I sprinted across the clearing and tore on into the darkening game trail left by the strange deer. I pushed up, clambering over mossy rocks and slipping on a carpet of dead leaves. The scent clung to me as the spray of a skunk. It mingled with the musty odor of the mud streaked on my elbows and knees, but never lessened for it. I must have climbed and ran for 20 minutes or more before I startled at a crack of lightning. Breathless and shaken, I leaned on my knees and wheezed against my rasping voice. The crack came again, behind me, and louder. I realized it was not lightning, but the sound of a log falling and shattering. I stepped carefully back down towards where I'd heard it, and whispered between my gasps, Scarlet? Is that you? Come on, baby girl, let's go home. But I was interrupted by something rushing past, not 10 yards up the embankment. The leaves stirred up like skin with a needle running under it. It was fast, and when it reached the peak of a cliff edge above, just out of sight, it screamed a scream that decayed into a death rattle. The birds and rodents fled their burrows and nests all at once until this patch of forest was suddenly silent in a way I have never heard. I considered turning back. I thought perhaps the wisest move was to call into town and return with a well-armed party. Yet it wasn't wisdom that would have driven that. It would have been cowardice and abdication of my duties as a brother. Still, I found myself paralyzed with indecision and fear. My foot fell in the wrong direction, just one step, but I was righted when I heard the long wailing cry of a child up that embankment where the cackling creature had slid. A sweeping blast of chilled air carried down again, and on it I smelled that sickly honey scent. I had to pursue. I had to keep going. It was little less than a cliff draped with slime and moss, but I was able to surmount it with much effort. And when I crawled up atop the cliff's edge and climbed to my feet, I was in a clearing, but one very recently made. It was an unnatural scene of destruction, something akin to a war zone. The trees, some thick and older than the country in which they grew, were torn down to splinters that stood up tall and brightly colored like spires. Whatever had cleaved these trees had done so recently and thoroughly and with great brutality. Spread out before me was a clearing made by recent violence of something large, that much was clear. An icy wind blasted here with a ferocity I could not explain by the incoming storm alone. It roared in my ears. I pulled my jacket tight to my ribs and cut easily through the thick wool I wore. I was as bare as a babe left in the woods for the wolves. The wind in its roar muffled a chorus of cries and screams that emanated from the shadowy trees with no obvious source. But I could hear Scarlet's voice amongst them, I was sure. No sooner had I picked out the voice did I catch another whiff of the sweet rotting fruit scent that had carried me up here. I pressed my shoulder into that arctic gale and pushed on towards the cries. From here, the trees ended, and the embankment of the forest valley turned steep, up towards rocky outcroppings strung together by goat trails. The dark and heavy clouds began their deluge. Rivers wove around the stone abutments that held back the loose shale and gravel of the scramble towards the valley's highest ridge. Were it not for these outcroppings directing the rainfall, I may not have even seen the faint impressions of a child's foot on the path ahead. It wound up. That path wound up like a jagged stitch against the cliff, far up and far enough that the rain drew a gray curtain between me and it. I saw a small shadow stumbling on. I called, but the lightning was bellowing its frightening growls, and my voice was little more than a gnat in an orchestra. I pushed beyond reason and my limits up and up the slickening rivers that unsettled the shales, against the slickening rivers that unsettled the shale. Every step along this trail took me higher and made every slip quicken my heart more. I was deep into a mist of rain and fog. The path was marked with footprints rapidly dissolving in the waterfall the storm was creating. I was above the tree line in the thick mist of the high ridge when I saw her red cloak. I cried her name, but she did not look at me. A lightning flash cut through the fog and revealed a silhouette of a tall and terrible thing. It wore a deer's rack, but stood upright, and it seemed to have enchanted or terrified my little sister. I forgot all my reason and leapt forward, scrambling like a hound after the hare up the slick, broken rocks of this high cliff. I jumped on her to grasp her away from the mountains, but the cloak fell flat, and I slid with it down the shale, grasping it, tumbling with terrible cracks and blinding strikes to my head until I rolled out, broken and limp, down back at the tree line. There in the muck and under a falling stream of hard rain, I saw the creature for what it was. It held Scarlet's hand and sneered at me with the unmistakable face of my father. Gone he had been for years, mostly known through tales from my mother of his terror. He watched me for a moment, then walked on in this terrifying animalistic form with Scarlet at his side till I could see them no more. Okay. Well, let's put some cheerful music back on. And yeah, that's our first horror one. I'm thinking of doing the Alien one next week, which uses some cards to do sort of the chase sequence of Alien. I don't know for sure if I'll do that, though. I might save that one for later. Lots of people dropped in. Gennaro said, so did he kidnap Scarlet or kill her? We may never know. Yes, yeah. I like the unknown in horror short stories, but if people dislike the ending, you are welcome to write your own ending. That is the point. GS says, wow, excellent writing tonight, Rory. Don't know how you do it. Well, thank you, GS. I won't hold anybody back any longer from the rest of the night. I hope those who came about and gave ideas, Joanne Baxter, who was a fellow writer and of mine, and Gennaro, who is a regular contributor, and we appreciate their presence, as well as GS. Thank you to everybody who dropped by and said hello, and even people who lurked. If you're enjoying spooky content, well, we're going to be reading stuff on these more, I hesitate to say horror, on the spooky side of things on Tuesday nights until October 31st, really. Where we, anyways. If you enjoyed the stream, give it a like. If you did, you don't have to. And if you want to see more Halloween content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much. Janera says, enjoyed being here as always. Well, I enjoyed having you, Janera. Thank you everyone for watching. And of course, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Get out of my shop.